this is the South breakout room. Please let me know if you're not intending to be here. I think we've put in the chat the other breakout rooms. So hopefully everyone here is intending to be in the South breakout room, and we're going to get started again. Hopefully you all were able to use Slido earlier, because we are going to use Slido in this discussion to get some feedback from each of you. But in the meantime, I want to give you some definitions and some background. So I defined some terms earlier, and I want to make sure you're able to work from those terms. Just as a reminder, the South breakout room is kind of anything south of Pennsylvania Avenue down towards the Charles and Calvert County lines and Fairfax, Virginia. So hopefully you're where you want to be. So I want to describe some of the terms that we talked about earlier, so that when you're giving your input, it's going to be, you're going to have that information ahead of you. So we're going to start off talking about active transportation. This was one of my favorite activities in Bike to Work Day, and it's one of those things that happens here in the county. So hopefully if you like a bicycle, or you haven't ridden one in a while but want to, you'll participate in this. So what is active transportation? By active transportation, we're talking about the transport of people or goods through non-motorized means. So it's based around human physical activity. So when we're talking about active transportation, we're talking about walking and biking, skateboarding and roller skating. So those are the kinds of activities that we're talking about when we mention active transportation. When we had our meetings with the agency and municipal leaders, we asked them a few questions, and we're going to ask of you your thoughts on their feedback. So the questions we asked were, what are the biggest impediments from their perspective to building new trails in the county? What are the most significant gaps in the trail system? And how can the master plan of transportation help improve trail development and trail maintenance? So a lot of the questions we were asking were around the facilities used to do active transportation. We started getting some feedback from them. And so some of the things that they talked about, and the interesting thing is that we asked these questions, and a lot of them are about all areas of the county. So it's not South focused. I just want to make sure you know that. So some impediments for existing and future trail paths included political priorities and funding realities, meaning there was no funding or there was not political will to move some of those options forward. Lack of ownership regarding maintenance. And just to kind of give you a little insight, once the facility is built, someone has to be responsible for maintaining it. And sometimes there were challenges for between jurisdictions to get someone to take ownership, or between the state and the county, or the local and the county. So it could be any of those. Difficulties finding available rights of way and property information. So I live in North County, but in my community, we had a trail that no one knew who owned it. And so it went into a state of disrepair. So that sort of thing. And then finally, lack of trail connectivity, meaning you have a trail and then it kind of just drops you off in the middle of nowhere. So you can't continue using it. Some of the areas where gaps were identified were in Laurel, Hyattsville, kind of the Chilham area going into the District of Columbia, Rhode Island and Charles Armentrout Drive intersection, and where you cross a state road like 193, 202, and 201. Some of the suggestions for improving this were to reassess current trails and encourage maintenance schedules, to create uniform wayfinding and lighting so that there's a way that you know where this trail is taking you to and that you can see it clearly at all times. And then to educate the public about active transportation. The more people know about it and understand, rules of the road as a cyclist or on a skateboard, then the better they will be prepared to do it safely. So we're going to go back in the Slido, which is my exciting place. So hopefully you are able to either 1, use a second tab on your computer, or 2, use your device and scan this QR code here. And now the code here will be MPOT 2035S for South County. So the question we're going to ask, in your view, what is missing from that active transportation feedback? And so I think here, because most of that feedback was either Central or North County, tell us where there are connections that are missing if you are using active transportation at all, if you're walking, if you're biking or walking your dog or animal. Where are, in your view, what's missing from that feedback that I just shared? So hopefully we'll get you guys to participate using Slido here, and that helps us to document all of the feedback we've gotten. Don't be shy. Well, now seeing no comments, my question is, are people using any of the active transportation modes here that is on the meeting? Or are you having a challenge accessing the Slido? Okay.
That's would it be too much if I request to bring back that active transportation, the three
Oh,
items?
sure. No, not a problem, because the poll is
Thank
active and you should be able to use it. So let me go back a slide. Oop, that didn't work. Let's go back a slide.
Sorry.
No, no problem. Except that that does not want to go backward. That's weird. Hmm. So I'm going to have to tell you, Malik, can you tell us verbally?
Yeah. NPO, the code.
No, what those what that feedback was. So some of that feedback, oh, okay, that's a paragraph. Great. So that makes sense. Oh, Christine, I love you. Thank you for screenshotting that. So some of the preliminary feedback, their impediments for existing and future trail paths include their political priorities, meaning the politicians, there's no political will or there's not funding. So finding someone who's going to put the funding, lack of ownership regarding the maintenance, difficulties finding available right-of-way or property information so that you know where to put it, and lack of trail connectivity. And so one of the important pieces there is, and Malik, unfortunately, when you copy and paste black text, it shows up white and it shows up black. So it's difficult to read. So I think you have to convert that first to make it white text, and then you'll be able to do it. Then some trail gaps. So one of the things I am interested in knowing is where are there gaps if you are trying to walk in your community. Are you able to walk or finding yourself running up against like a sidewalk issue where the sidewalks don't connect? Or, tell me kind of where that is in the county. The one comment we see so far is considering the needs of what permanent residents, those with 30-year mortgages have and plan to stay in their homes. Most importantly is safe walkways, safe sidewalks, scooterways with signage and lighting. So that is definitely important. I completely agree with that. Does anyone else planning for trail connectivity in the absence of expected land development? Huh, okay. That one's a deep one. How do you do trail connectivity when you don't know what the land development is going to be? But that is what a master plan of transportation can help you identify, where there are opportunities for future trails, where there are opportunities for future development, and how we might be able to connect them. Are there any other thoughts maybe where there may be gaps? Just out of curiosity, whereabouts are we living in the county? Are we living in South County? Are we living more in Clinton, or are we living kind of further down Baden and Accokeek, Brandywine?
No, Fort Washington.
Fort Washington. Okay. So that can also, well, the reason I asked the question I did about where you live, Akakeek, there's no sidewalks, period. That can be really a challenge, and we need to know that. Oxon Hill, okay, that's helpful. I know Oxon Hill has sidewalks. I know that there are some challenges with connectivity. So if you kind of let us know where are we maybe missing connections, then it's something that we can start planning for and looking at the types of roadways and how we can address them. So, yes.
Yeah, I was gonna say we getting some comments in the chat too, as far as in folks. I'm not sure if that's because of Slido, but David Walker.
Yeah.
You want to mention what you stated in the comments?
Yeah, I see that. Tucker Road path is well maintained, but needs to be lengthened. So going further up into Oxon Hill or further down into Fort Washington?
So it cuts off. I mean, it's very well maintained. I give them credit for that, but it stops, I guess, a little past Brinkley or something like that, Brinkley Road.
Yeah.
And then the other end, I guess, is Oxon Hill Road. And it cuts off and there's a street there and that's it. I don't know if it can be lengthened or wrapped around, but maybe it's 5 to 7 miles total or something like that.
And it's beautiful. I've actually ridden my bike down there. So I'm a cyclist, so I love riding in the county wherever I can. And so I appreciate that. I see that Fort Washington missing bike trails pretty much. People are biking on busy streets in the dark. It can be uncomfortable, right? As a cyclist and for drivers. So thank you very much for that comment. And I see that, oh yeah, that was in Fort Washington and like Piscataway Road. So tell me a little bit more about what's happening in Clinton. Oh, I see. And I see this. I see people walking on Livingston Road, that's Maryland 210, or across 210 to the shopping center across the highway all the time. Very dangerous. I completely agree with that. And that we obviously don't want to put ourselves in that position. So we've got to make sure there are facilities to allow people to do that. Wonderful. Are there any other thoughts? I can move on to the next part of this discussion. Just wanted, yeah.
I wanted to add that in the Barnaby Manor area of Oxon Hill, which is Wheeler Road, that goes between Wheeler Road and Southern Avenue, or Wheeler Road over to Temple Hills, or St. Barnabas to Temple Hills, there's limited sidewalks. And that is an older community with quite a few of older residents who are just unsafe because there's no sidewalks. And because Wheeler Road and St. Barnabas are major throughways, the traffic, you can't have traffic calming measures, but the sidewalks would add some measure of security, but they just don't exist.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I know that area well. And so that's very helpful. And I'm glad we're both recording the meeting and we're taking comments. So I appreciate you speaking up. That is an area where that's something to be considered, and how we make sure that all citizens, no matter what age or their ability level, are actually able to walk in the county. That is a huge piece of what active transportation. We want citizens to be able to walk, right? That keeps us healthy. We've seen a lot of evidence to that, and so I appreciate that, especially in South County. So I think that's super important. Wonderful, thank you. Anyone else? I do see the comment. Can you touch on the Capital Trails Coalition's suggested paths, and will those be supported? And I don't know, Crystal, if you want to touch on that, or because I'm not as clear about all of the trails in the Capital Trails Coalition, and so I don't want to speak on it, but I don't know if, Crystal, you are a little bit more aware of all of them.
I mean, I'm not totally aware of all of them, but I do know that we are coordinating through our ATAG, or Active Transportation Advisory Group, that meets, which some of the participants from that work with the Capital Trails Coalition are a part of that, and we continue to keep them updated, and they continue to keep us updated what they're doing. So that is some information that we can share with you if you'd like that information, Eli.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Crystal. I see two comments that I think are important. No sidewalks in Piscataway and Clinton. I do know that very much. I do know that. And lots of master plan trails were planned down or along streams in environmentally sensitive areas. And for those who may not understand what the impact of that is, if they're near an environmentally sensitive area, they may not be able to get permitted and installed. So you may be planning for it, but because of the environment, you're not able to actually construct them. And so they turn into kind of just a pipe dream that you'll never actually see come to fruition.
Right. Odessa, this is one of the items that we are very much aware of. And one of the part of what we're trying to do with this process is to make sure that our environmental team is very much involved in the placement of trails and active transportation infrastructure, so that we can avoid that happening to the extent possible, because I know what happened last time, and that's why we're working together collaboratively and collectively to make sure that we have identified that information, so that we are working to try to fix that.
Yes, absolutely. So with that, I want to move on just so that we make sure that we get to all of the subject areas, because there's quite a bit to go. Vision Zero, I want to talk a little bit about what Vision Zero is, and then how our mindset has changed around transportation and safety, and what we're hoping to achieve as a result. So, what is Vision Zero? Vision Zero is a countywide strategy to achieve zero fatalities or serious injuries on roadways by the year 2040. As part of Vision Zero, the county recognizes that the loss of even one life or serious injury on our roads is absolutely unacceptable. Vision Zero uses a data-driven approach, and through it reveals that vehicle crashes are generally predictable, and therefore you can prevent them. If you can predict it, you can prevent it. If we look at crash data, it becomes clear there's a need for safety improvements on our roadways to help us achieve that goal of zero injuries or zero serious injuries or fatalities. The keys to success in achieving Vision Zero requires a combined approach using 6 essential elements for a safe transportation system. So we're going to look at 2 different approaches, a traditional approach and a Vision Zero approach to what happens on roadways. Under the traditional approach, we took the position that traffic deaths are inevitable, right? That they're going to happen no matter what we do. We also assumed that human behavior was going to be perfect, and that what we should try to do was prevent collisions and put all of the responsibility on an individual. So on the individual's behavior, and they were responsible. And then we also kind of unfortunately took the position that saving lives is expensive, right? Because the strategies you have to implement in order to do these in order to make the roadway safer cost more money. Under the Vision Zero approach, which we are now accepting, it's that traffic deaths are actually preventable. We can do things to the roadway, to the education of our drivers and our walkers and all of our users of our infrastructure, so that we can prevent a death on a roadway. We integrate the fact that there are human failings in this approach. We work to prevent fatal and severe crashes with some of the strategies. And instead of making it an individualistic approach, we make it a systems approach. And we say that every life is worth something, so saving lives is not expensive. So when we talked about Vision Zero with those agency and municipal leaders, we asked some questions again. So what are some of the impediments to implementing Vision Zero? So what are the challenges with making Vision Zero a reality? How can the master plan of transportation help to achieve those goals, right? That same goal of no serious injuries, no deaths or fatalities on any of our roadways. And the third is, are there safety improvements in one part of the county that you'd like to see in another? So this one I think is really going to be helpful. What have you seen as you've traveled the county? And that's available here. So some of the feedback we heard is that some of the impediments to actually implementing a Vision Zero approach is there's limited funding and there's very limited political will. I think politicians want it, but they don't quite know how to achieve it without having to sacrifice something else. Another impediment is education and driver behavior. We've learned to drive or got our licenses when we were teenagers, and we've developed habits, and then we're going to continue those habits for our driving lives. And that doesn't have to be the case. Another impediment to Vision Zero are wide roadways. And so South County definitely has a lot of 2-lane roads and winding roads, but there are also roads like 210 and Maryland 4 that have sections of them that are wide, 6 lanes, 8 lanes. It's kind of like a speedway. There are areas of that in the county that we've definitely seen. And the last impediment that they mentioned was a lack of collaboration, meaning once you leave Charles County and get into the Prince George's County line, do we collaborate? Are we working together as two adjoining counties? Or once you leave South County and you start getting into the inside of the Beltway, are you still behaving the same in those different cities? We heard from those groups that MPOT can help achieve Vision Zero by encouraging the public and interagency coordination, and by incorporating safety infrastructure into development proposals. So if we're planning to build something in a part of the county, some new infrastructure, a new building or a new development, we can build in sidewalks as part of the requirement. If you're going to build a huge new building, you've got to put sidewalks adjacent to it. Things that people would like to see more are pedestrian facilities, which I think we've already talked about, protected bike lanes, tactical urbanism, which I can explain in a minute, and improved urban design standards and roadways. So that was some of what we heard as the feedback. So here we go again with Slido. I just ran out of my head. It's sitting right there. And so you should be able to continue using the Slido and be able to fill in here. So what is missing from that Vision Zero feedback? So we just said, I just kind of explained we want 0 deaths, and what do we think is important so that we can actually achieve Vision Zero? So from your perspective, what do you think we can do? And we can use the Slido, we can use the chat, you can come off mute and talk to me because I'm talking to a screen, and let me know. So working with the state to reduce the number of intersections on 210. So many of you have seen if you've traveled the 210 corridor, the project that was taking some of those intersections away and creating more of an overpass and an underpass situation. And the intent is to do it along 210 over the long period of time. But that is one example. It's definitely one good strategy. Are there any other thoughts about how we can improve our roadway safety? Either using Slido or the chat or coming off mute. Equitable ATE, and I'm not sure the acronym ATE. I'm not sure if that's alternative transportation. I'm not sure. Automated traffic enforcement. Okay, so you're talking about the cameras, like the speed cameras or the red light cameras. So using them everywhere consistently. That is a great idea. So I do know that in some areas you'll see them on construction zones, in some areas you don't. More speed cameras and higher fines. That is one way. It's definitely it's a strategy in order to get people to slow down. And definitely, I can definitely attest to in South County that speeds are really a challenge. Pedestrian civility and community partners to ensure that the rules of the road are jointly adhered to. Love that. I love that. Working with the state to reduce the number of intersections. I think I said that one already. Reciprocity between Maryland, DC, and Virginia. So that really is a regional approach, incorporating a regional approach. I can appreciate that as an idea. Any other thoughts? How else can we work to improve safety on our roadways and make those roadways safer for all of us? Any other thoughts? More streetlights on dark winding roads. That's what I expected to see in South County, for sure. Not higher fines. Higher fines don't prove to change behavior. It's inequitable for lower income people. There are definitely a lot of schools of thought around surrounding fines, but as a deterrent, they can be a good deterrent, but are they fair? Some people are willing to pay the fine and continue to speed. What we really want to get to the root of is driver behavior. How do we make people care about life and the lives of themselves and others so that they won't be willing to pay the fine? I love this, driver safety courses for repeat offenders. So if you have regular traffic moving violations, that you have to go to driver safety courses. Traffic calming measures in busier areas.
I have a
Excellent.
question.
Please, go ahead.
Is Vision Zero training taught through MVA, Maryland Department of Vehicle, when people get their driver's license? Is that a part of their driver's license or learner's permits or any type of that?
No, as a matter of fact, the county just incorporated Vision Zero a couple of years ago. And I was going to ask if anyone has ever seen a Vision Zero sign. There are actually signs in the county. Have you ever seen a sign about Vision Zero?
I think so.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember where it is. I work in the district, and as a part of being an employee, every employee had to go through Vision Zero training, but that did nothing for the people coming into the district or the people driving.
Right.
So that's why I want to know how does this link to driver preparedness? So I would suggest we somehow link that to driver preparedness. Young people getting their driver's licenses be a part of their required training for the county as a part of that, some kind of way.
I love that idea, because what we have seen proof of is that when you train people, then they behave differently if they understand why and the safety. Incorporated into the DMV is what I see one of the comments. Also, maybe we can put up billboards along dangerous highways, and that also can act as a deterrent without it being, financially punitive, just helping people to understand kind of the impact of their behavior. I really like the idea of making sure we're educating young people, because that is a strategy that is important. For them to behave or to start their driver behavior early and continue it for the duration of their driving career. Increased support of mass transit options. Yay! I love that, actually. I love that answer. I love transportation and I love transit. I also see in the chat traffic light timing coordination. So that is also something very, very helpful and could be useful. Oh, okay, I can appreciate this. 2040 is a long way off, perhaps not waiting so long to save lives. And I will say that where the goal is Vision Zero and you're kind of approaching this, right? So that by that time you won't have any. But I love the idea of saying make it immediate. Don't make it something that's a far off goal. Make it an immediate goal and be working on it constantly. I think that is a really key component. One comment, radical public service announcements showing graphic content of accidents. I remember, not graphic, but I remember when I was a young person, it was the fried egg on the frying pan, the egg on the frying pan. This is drugs. This is your brain on drugs, right? So something that is alarming enough or sensationalized enough that can help people understand the impact of driver safety, pedestrian behavior, etc. This has been great. thank you all so much for participating here. I think, yeah, I would say that's why I used the example that I did, because graphic content can be super triggering to some folks, or can be very disturbing. Not everyone can handle the same level, but finding a strategy that can still create a deterrent while also creating the educational option is super important. And I can appreciate that comment. Thank you so much. All right. This has been wonderful. I really appreciated all of these thoughts here. Reward good behavior. That I love. A lot of times we talk about deterrence and we don't spend a lot of time talking about encouragement. Encourage people for behaving well. Something like insurance vouchers or benefits. I think there's one insurance company that does it now. If you have 0 accidents over a long period of time, they give you a reduction on your rates. So things like that can be incredibly incentivizing, and finding a way to do it positively. I think that's as equally a good idea as any. So I want to go on to 3, which is transit. And just so that we make sure that we get through the next 3 pieces, we've got good time, but want to make sure we have enough. So just really quickly, going back again into the definitions piece, what is transit? In the study that we're talking about here, we're defining transit as motorized public transportation. And by that, we're including buses, bus rapid transit, and rail transit. As part of the MPOT, we will identify locations within the county that can be considered as high congestion, low transit corridors, meaning we don't have enough transit and yet we have a lot of congestion. So there are a couple of roadways that we could say that on, especially in South County. Sometimes it feels like these roads that just go in and there's no other way around. The MPOT will also identify best practices for addressing transportation concerns in those corridors. So what are those concerns? And then what are the ways that we can address them? Identifying roadways and transit infrastructure that may require additional infrastructure to achieve long-term mode share. So by that, we mean over the long term, we want to see people in moving from single occupancy vehicles into other methods of transit. So whether that be car ride share, meaning that you're doing HOV and having HOV lanes, that's one option. Whether that means that you're now going onto a bus because now the bus is conveniently going from where you're starting and getting to where you're ending. Whether that means that you are using, you're able to get from a bus to the train and then take the train maybe into the city, that's another option. And then the other thing the MPOT will do is identify large-scale transit corridors in the county and additional potential future bus transit corridors. Oh, great. I do see this comment that the Washington Area Bicyclist Association, which is WABA, is going to be starting a Prince George's County Families for Safe Streets chapter. And anyone who's interested, there's a link here for Hannah in the chat. So going into the transit questions. So we just talked about the definition of transit. So going into the transit questions, where do you see transit in Prince George's County in the next 5, 10, or 15 years? And what are your priorities, concerns, and opportunities? Where are there opportunities for transit improvement? These are the questions that we asked of the municipal and agency leaders, and some of the feedback we received. In this 5 to 15 year timeframe, people wanted to see a wider breadth of transit as a network. They wanted to see more frequent service and late night weekend service. They wanted to see connections to transit-oriented development areas. They wanted to see better pedestrian facilities that could increase transit ridership. So I just mentioned wanting to be able to say, in order to get to my final destination, I've got to be able to have the facility to get to the bus, meaning somewhere to walk, and then be able to then get on the bus and use that safely. And then reorienting development to the street. Some of those priorities include equity of access. We want to be thinking about how do we equitably approach getting people onto transit? How do we connect workers to jobs? how do we deal with the first and last mile problem? And when we talk about first and last mile, a lot of times there are people who might be willing to use transit, but they live a mile away from the closest transit stop. So you live well into your development, as an example. So you'd have to walk a mile to get out of the neighborhood in order to get on transit. And that by itself can serve as a pretty hefty deterrent. And then the other priority is reliability and ease of use. So once again, using Slido, we're going to ask, in your view, what is missing from the transit feedback? In your view, what is missing from the transit feedback? Rockin' Malik. If you look in the chat, you'll see what people want to see in 5 to 15 years. And then if you can let us know what you think about. So people want to see a broader transit network. They want to see more frequent service, and they want to see late night and weekend service. They want to connect to transit-oriented development areas. They want better pedestrian facilities so that that can help, so that it won't be a deterrent to transit ridership. And they want to reorient development to the street so that people are closer to where they want to arrive. Yeah, I agree. There are definitely some areas in southern Fort Washington that have no bus and people are walking on the roads with no sidewalks. And so we've got to make sure we're fixing things like that. Oh, how about extending the Purple Line further south from College Park into south parts of the county? That is something super important. Oh, extended hours for PGC Link, currently very limited. And for those who don't know what PGC Link is, it is a microtransit option. And by microtransit, we're referring to an ability, a service that operates similarly to Uber and Lyft. It's more of an on-demand service, but it's at a more affordable price point. So it is run by the county Department of Public Works and Transportation. It has recently been rolled out. I think we rolled it out about 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, right at the start of the pandemic. And the important thing is that as people are using it, there is a desire to increase it. So I love the idea of extended hours and extended use, making it broader throughout the county. For those who don't realize, PGC Link is currently only available in South County. So hopefully some of you will use it. One of my kind of pet projects is PGC Link. Another idea is publicly supported rideshare options, which is similar to what I'm just describing, PGC Link, which is microtransit. Commuter buses that actually go into DC and don't stop at another place, which makes the trip very long. That's a really good point. Any other thoughts? Any other thoughts about what can be done to make transit either more desirable or work better?
Odessa.
Yes.
I heard today that there's a plan to start a ferry from Woodbridge through National Harbor into DC. It's already been in the planning stage for about 12 years. Are we linked into that or no?
Crystal, any thoughts on that ferry service?
I had heard of some ferry, but I'm not familiar with this one, but we definitely will go ahead and take a look and see to see if there's any way we can get some more information, and we'll go ahead and see if it's a possibility from one of the considerations for the plan. Thank you.
And definitely for folks in South County looking at getting from, I think about, I've ridden my bike from Oxon Hill, from National Harbor across into Alexandria, right? And so having those kinds of connections, you've got the waterfront and you could connect into Virginia. And so why wouldn't we try to use that and make that a service that we could really benefit from, especially here in the county? Commuter buses to DC metro stops, that's one. I see ferries that work with the marinas, and I also see in 5 years, reliable, safe, and cost-effective transit bus and rail services. Yes, I love this next part because I say this all the time. Start planning for heavy rail for South County down to 10 connecting to Brandywine. In 10 years, plan for extension of blue line down to Brandywine. So the thought being, of course, that if we could have more heavy rail that would get people down into South County, that would be an important improvement from a transit perspective. Associated support for safe wildlife corridors and crossings. Absolutely. Definitely a lot of accidents that are happening on our roadways. And that even kind of ties into Vision Zero a little bit because of animals crossing and especially in those kind of wilder, those areas that are a little bit more rural, South County. Connecting non-transit centers with places that have been identified as transit centers. So I love this one. I know the value of having like a senior center connected to a transit center, right? So that you're moving seniors to a way for them to move, or connecting supermarkets and places where people are convening, supermarkets, destination locations like a stadium or something like that, to a transit center, so that people will not feel that they need to use their car, but they can use transit. So love all of those ideas that you've provided there. Thank you guys very much. Just keeping my eye on the time. I think we're still good. It's about 7:15. I think I only have 2 more sections left, but just wanted to make sure I don't lose anything. Oh, wait, can't leave without taking this one. Mobility services for all residents. So that is definitely important, and I'm assuming you're talking about paratransit, which allows anyone with any ability challenges, whether it be that they're in a wheelchair, whether it be that they're blind.
Yeah.
I think that's what you mean, right? Yes.
Oh,
And
total
offering any mobility that allows them to be able to use all of the transit services. Absolutely. Love that one. Can't leave without discussing that for sure. Any other thoughts from anyone?
There was one in the chat.
One in the chat. I saw commuter buses to DC Metro stops and the ferry, so I think we're good. Bike shares at local parks. I love that. I love that idea. And then really connecting them. So making that really a connecting point. If you're able to get a bike share from your neighborhood and get to the transit stop, that's super important. Get from where people want to go to where people want to go. So where you are to where you want to go. Excellent. All right, we're going to talk about roadways next. I'm sure you guys are going to have a lot of feedback on roadways. What? I went backwards. All right. So as part of the roadway section, the Master Plan of Transportation will evaluate master plan right-of-way for all roadway classifications. It'll identify where additional roadways should be proposed for future consideration. It'll assess existing and possibly identify the designation of scenic and historic roadways. And it'll identify roadways that may require additional infrastructure to support an adequate level of service for current expected mode share. And that, by that, which is a lot of technical jargon, by that we're meaning that it's, you look which roads may need some more support, may need intersections or stoplights or any other piece of infrastructure, or the removal of stoplights so that traffic moves a little bit freer, so that you're able to actually have people move safely. So some of the questions we asked around roadways were, what roadway elements and factors has Prince George's County seen since 2009 that would impact the roadway facility recommendations in the new master plan? So what elements and factors has the county seen? And then the second are, what specific issues or considerations should be addressed in the update for the master plan of transportation as part of the scenic and historic road designation process? or application of special design standards for these designated roadways. So I think here there are a lot of openings here for questions and feedback. Some of the feedback we heard, things that have changed since 2009, is there are more budgetary constraints and there's a higher need for maintenance. We have to consider right-of-way widths for utilities and trails and bike lanes. And that's something that we weren't considering as much before. We have to consider federal infrastructure money and how that may be filtered into the county. There have been more accidents since 2009. There's been an increased emphasis on non-vehicular travel and on electric vehicles. There's been a change in the growth in commuting patterns, and let's not even talk about the commuting patterns of the last 2 years, which are definitely different than what we would have anticipated. And the corridors are changing, even those rural roads like 301 and 4 when you get kind of really further south. Some of the considerations for scenic and historic roadways include the safety of drivers and bicyclists, how to accommodate utilities, and the need for a scale to help you identify and designate a scenic roadway. So based on that, some of the factors that we want to think about, talk to me a little bit about roadways. So Malika's going to put in the chat what was in that roadway feedback, but tell us a little bit about what you think is missing from the roadways. What should we be thinking about? And again, some of those factors are in the chat. This one's a little bit more, a little bit different. 210 is very dangerous. In 2005, it received federal funding to upgrade it, but it has been so slow. Very true. That project has been extremely slow. Part of that always is that you've got to have enough money you've got to have designed improvements. You have to figure out how to improve the safety of it, but still getting it in place without completely shutting the roadway down, that really can be challenging. Just in curiosity, you mentioned that 210 is dangerous. Why is it dangerous? Is it dangerous because it's so wide? Is it dangerous because of speeds? Is it, or is it maybe a combination of all of those? Just, I'm curious.
All of the above. No payments, people walking, it's dark.
Yeah.
High speed, trying to cross the street.
Yeah.
Very, very dangerous. But they have completed that flyover at Livingston Road.
At Livingston.
Right. They need more of that.
Yeah. So hopefully, as the corridor gets funded, there'll be some more of that. And I think that first phase of that work goes down towards, can't remember where the cutoff is, but it's a good ways down to 10. I think there are eight intersections that they would ultimately be removing, so that flyover would happen multiple places. Current landscape buffer requirements for scenic historic right-of-way doesn't encourage any unique character. Huh, I love this comment. Just lots of plant material and distances. Unique character, that is a really good point, right? That you want to have, okay, you enter this area and you can tell I'm in this scenic historic roadway, and this is taking me into an agricultural area. I would love to see that. Consider using traffic control measures in dense sections of the highway. Huh. Now, are we talking there about adding traffic signals? Or are we talking about like maybe ramp metering? There are a number of different traffic control measures that you can use.
Well, I was thinking more of highway rumble strips when you're entering to, like going down 210 when you get to Swan Creek. So as you're approaching that dense area, you start to use traffic control measures. Kind of like when you go into the airport. As
Yep.
you are going into the airport, you get the rumples, and when you leave the airport, you don't have them. So I
Yeah.
don't know what that's about, but I was just thinking of mechanisms to be sensitive to the fact that it is stretches of highway. And in stretches of highway, I'm not a fan of speed cameras because the money is really just gouging and people pay it and keep going. But behavior wise, if people start to think this is a community where there's interaction,
Yeah.
then they'll slow down if there's things to remind them.
I love that. And I love that reference to the rumble strips, because I think that can be it just kind of reminds you. Years ago, Maryland State Highway had a campaign where they put in work zones signs that would have a little kid, and these were deterrents for speeding. It was a little kid, and it says, "My mom works here." And it would be on the side of the roadway. Same kind of concept, something that just jars your attention enough to make you consider and how to change your behavior. I see that there's too much stopping because of the intersections on 210. And the more stopping you have, the more opportunity you have for crashes. Possibly design and use guidelines for future automated vehicles. I love that, thinking about the technology and where we see the technology taking us in the future. Consider high occupancy lanes, but not tolls. So HOV lanes where you've got 3 people and you can get in that lane, but you don't have the toll feature, which can create a financial burden. Repaving on 210 and beautification. I'd love to hear a little bit more about what we're thinking around beautification.
Odessa, I wonder if it's the removal of trash along, I'm considering maybe even 210, and to make sure, I know that is with the county council, that's one of the things that they encourage state highway specifically, is to make sure that we are, that they're still mowing grass, and that they are, even though it's a no mow, where we are now, as well as sort of maybe picking up some of the trash along roadways. One comment in the chat really is that visual cues to differentiate appropriate speeds. I thought.
Now, I saw that and I was just about to get excited about this. So that is definitely a strategy that is used. It's used a lot in urban environments for certain, that you may narrow the road just so people know that their speeds have to go down, or narrow the lane width. Those are kind of visually, you don't really necessarily know that it's happening, but it's enough that you start to change your behavior a little bit. So I love that as a suggestion. Maybe some big art sculptures on the side of highways so that people have something that they can see, that makes them, it can create senses of place and pride in places. And so I think that is a great idea as well. Excellent. All right, thank you. I knew I was going to get some feedback when it related to roadways, so I'm excited about that. I'm not sure what the check-in is. Is there anything else that we just talked about, or of any of those topics we've already talked about? Is there anything else that we want to make sure to mention? Anything? Just come on off mute or type it in the chat if there's anything else. Yeah, public art encourages character and identity of areas, and that's what I said. It's kind of that creating that sense of place. When you get to the wheel, right? You get to the wheel. Okay, I'm in National Harbor, but creating those spaces, other things that are iconic within the county, those can be extremely helpful for helping people have a sense of place, and helping also have pride of place, and I think that's really important. Any other thoughts? Any other thoughts before we move into sustainability? Okay. Right, so we're going to talk a little bit about sustainability then. So sustainability is a kind of a term of art that you hear a lot of people talking about, but the question often comes, and how does sustainability apply in transportation? So by sustainable transportation, we're referring to any means of transportation that is green and has a low impact on the environment. It's also about balancing our current and our future needs. So when we talk about sustainability in transportation, we're talking about things like improving freight efficiency so that you're using your freight vehicles, you're kind of maximizing the loads and reducing the number of trips. You're talking about increasing public transportation, which we've talked a little bit about with use of transit. We're talking about enhancing electric vehicle infrastructure, and that could be making sure that you have charging stations around that allow people to make the choice to get an electric vehicle rather than just a gas-powered one. We're talking about using green construction methods. Maximizing smart growth, meaning you don't just continue to build further down the road, but rather as you've got a developed area that you're infilling and developing within that so that your growth is smarter. You're building something new in areas that there's already transportation infrastructure to support. It's also talking about things like integrated land use, promoting green highways, and supporting bike-friendly communities. When we say sustainability in transportation, we're thinking about those things. I see a comment from Robin in the chat, so that I think is important. Ensure that the character and culture of the county is maintained with the different types of transportation efforts, meaning don't go building highways or roadways through neighborhoods, especially those established neighborhoods. And we've seen how that's happened in the past and how that can really destroy a really established neighborhood. So when we asked for the public agents and the agencies and municipalities to give us some feedback around sustainability, we asked them, we mentioned sustainability can have many meanings. Which of these aspects of sustainability have the most significant impact on your agency? And what we saw in both the agents from the public agency perspective and from the municipal mayors and staff that were in the municipal government, we saw that the number one for both was environmental sustainability, and then was fiscal sustainability, like how do we actually afford to contain it, continue, and then cultural and social sustainability. When we asked what other aspects of sustainability are important to you, we heard maintenance and then being able to sustain the maintenance, economic sustainability, state of good repair, or being able to keep those facilities in good order. And we heard infrastructure, so creating an infrastructure for sustainability. We also heard the life of a project or operation and operation resiliency are very important. We heard that supply chain and maintaining that is important for sustainability. And we also heard about equity. So it's important that whatever happens, we're applying it equitably across the county. So we're going to ask you again to use Slido and rank these for us. I mentioned that it can have many meanings. Which of the aspects of sustainability have the most important, significant impact on you? So just choose your top three. So hopefully we can get participation on Slido, because you can only, on this one, you can only vote once, I believe, and only comment once, but choose your top three. So again, you can go to slido.com or scan this QR code. And then just let us know which of these sustainability functions are most important in your perspective, your top three. Also, if you're not using Slido, you can go ahead and put them in the meeting chat. And as others start to participate, we see these start to adjust, which is also kind of cool. So definitely maintenance sustainability seems to be a high priority. Any other feedback, or do you want to answer in the chat or answer verbally? Any of that would be welcomed. what seems to matter. Well, and I appreciate that comment, concern that equity is something that's being voted on. What we're trying to understand is how people perceive and where it ranks in their minds. Are they, when they start thinking about sustainability, are they thinking about equity? And if not, then how do we get people to start making that thought process, right? So it's helpful for us to know we need to start doing more education around equity. We're not voting on it to say one is more important than the other. Not in this case. We're just wanting to understand people's perspective and perception on equity. But I appreciate that comment. I could see how that could give an unexpected, how it could create that perception. Any other thoughts? Any other thoughts on sustainability and what's important? Anybody could feel free to come off mute and bring up a thought or write it in the chat. Okay. Wonderful. Thank you to you who participated. Okay, we're rounding the corner, folks. We're going to talk a bit about goals and success indicators, just to help us understand what's that success? What are those goals, and what does success look like? Nope. Let's go forward. So, elements of a successful transportation system. So what are the key elements of a successful transportation system for your agency or municipality? And as I mentioned before, with the word cloud, the words that you see the largest are what people see as kind of the key. And so both the agencies and the municipalities said a successful transportation system is safe. Safety is their number one thought. And then you see that accessibility for the municipalities was a high point. On both, having multimodal transportation was important. And then you start to see some of the other thoughts. I just want to make sure I kind of go through a few of these, but efficiency, mass transit, equity, public transit, public safety, walkability, making sure that transportation is complete, meaning it is available for users of all ages and abilities, having the ability to be walkable and have shorter trips. I think a little earlier, Robin mentioned having mobility, that transportation is cohesive with the neighborhood that it's adjacent to, low carbon, that it's connected. Those are all things that resonate as important for a successful transportation system. We also asked that asked about Plan 2035, which I told you was the master plan for the county. Plan 2035 identified several transportation-related themes, and we asked people to rank the themes in order of importance to their agency or municipality. You'll see that both think safety is number one, but then they had accessibility and multimodal kind of flipped between the two, but then affordable and energy efficient were kind of rounding it out. So we're going to ask one more time if you can participate with Slido and let us know what are the important themes. What are there to you? What do you find important? Accessibility, affordability, energy efficiency, multimodality, safety, or some other item. What to you are the key factors for a successful transportation system? And feel free again to come off of mute or to put a thought in the chat. Any of those work just fine. Security. Okay, I like that. I appreciate that. Because that's other, that's not one that's listed, but that's really helpful. Any other thoughts? What do you think is important? Accessibility, being able to use the system, and then energy efficiency, safety, multimodal, and affordable. I see safety coming up a little bit. And this input is really helpful as we're starting to develop the master plan of transportation. We really are, it really acts as a guide, and it acts as a guide that we can be recommending for everything moving forward. And so having the ability for us to understand what's important to the county residents is really what's going to allow us to write a document that reflects the needs of the citizens in the county. Oh, I love that. A holistic and comprehensive network. Super important. Definitely. Yeah. Excellent. Any other thoughts? Any other thoughts on what, and maybe it's not just these. Tell me what is really important to you about making the transportation successful here in the county. All right. All right. So I'm going to go to transportation equity. That was another question. What are your top, and this I wanted to make sure, I think Hannah is still here, that we are actually going to talk about equity separately. So what are your top 3 equity concerns? Top 3 equity concerns, and we asked, and what we saw was accessibility was the top for both, and then affordability and mobility were very close behind. So having equity, what was super important to people, and that was really helpful here. So, and when we think about transportation equity, what are your top 3 equity related concerns? Your top 3. And hopefully this helps you see that this was already a given to us, but we wanted to understand how people rank them. So the top 3 transportation equity concerns, I see safety is one. Yeah, keeping people safe. Accessibility, making sure that it's accessible to people, that people can actually use the transportation system, that it's affordable, and that it gets you where you need to go. Anything else? Any other kind of thoughts on what are our real concerns around transportation equity? How do we ensure that our county and our residents are really able to use the system and feel that it doesn't matter anything about them as an individual, that everything that's happening is going to be happening equitably across the county? Perception of access and support between economic levels. Very interesting. I would want to hear more about that. A very interesting thought. Really important.
So I guess Odessa, my question would be to Christine. Is it that I think that's a fascinating response. Also, the perception of access. Is it yeah, I mean, I don't know, my little transportation brain just keeps like all over the place with that one.
That one set my brain in like a tailspin, Crystal.
Exactly. Maybe the perception of access to transportation. I don't know.
Yeah. That's a great, I mean, it's very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Great. So just talking again about success indicators, I just want to make sure we get through these. We're doing great on time, but we're coming close to the end. But some success indicators. So Plan 2035 identified several transportation related success indicators. And so we asked people to rank the indicators in order of importance to the agency or municipality. And right at the top was increasing bike and pedestrian facilities. From the public agency perspective, it was increasing housing and transportation affordability, and then maintaining level of service, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and increasing non-auto mode share. Where on the municipal level, it was increasing non-auto mode share, and then decreasing vehicle miles traveled, and then maintaining level of service. So, and increasing housing and transportation affordability. So that's very interesting. So just one more time here, if you can either put it in the chat or put it on, use Slido, tell us, can you rank for us the indicators and importance in order of their importance to you? Is it decreasing vehicle miles traveled? That's a successful transportation indicator. Maintaining level of service, and that can be the speeds that you're able to travel without excessive congestion. Transportation affordability. Increasing bike and pedestrian facilities, increasing non-auto mode share, commuting patterns, increasing commuting patterns to and within the county, or reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So any thoughts we have here would be great. Yeah, maintaining level of service and that non-auto mode share. That's really super important, having non-automobile mode share, non-motorized mode share. Can be really helpful. Getting people to use active transportation as a mode of not just recreation, but actual transportation to actually get to a destination. See, that brought that up a little bit. Great. Transportation affordability, super important. I don't think we can ever take that away. So now seeing decreasing vehicle miles traveled and increasing bike and pedestrian facilities and reducing greenhouse gases, those are shifting a little bit. Very helpful. Wonderful. I believe that was the end of our Slido. But I do want to give you all time if you have any thoughts or questions or anything else you wanted to discuss. I want to make sure you have an opportunity to do that here. Just want to let you know kind of what our engagement timeline looked like, and then I'll give you a chance to talk about anything else you're interested in as it relates to transportation here in the county. We started in September with meetings with the Active Transportation Advisory Group, or ATAG. In November, we held those meetings with the county and municipal leaders, and we were able to start developing the questions and refining them, but also getting feedback and getting some insights in how both organizationally the county agencies and the municipal leaders were thinking. Now we're having these community engagement meetings. So we have the one today. We'll have the exact same meeting tomorrow and Thursday, and hopefully we'll have participation again for those meetings. We'll prepare this draft existing conditions report this April. That draft will be working through the county for review. And then we'll have another set of meetings, which will be community advisory group meetings in the spring. And that goal is to have a little bit more in-depth conversation with folks in the community who are interested in transportation and really want to help us formulate this master plan of transportation. So that's our engagement timeline. As it relates to the project schedule, the next steps, you see that we're in the throes of the input process, but we'll be having later in the spring as existing conditions analysis, We'll have the planning board, or April, July. We'll have a draft plan, and then we'll have a public release of the draft plan. We'll have a joint public hearing in January of 2023, an adoption in April of 2023 of the final plan, and then in June, County Council approval and amendments, and then we'll get final approval with a second joint public hearing. We are going to want you to continue to engage with us and to give us feedback. I think it's super important for us to be able to get that. So we have an online survey. Malik has pasted that in the chat. It will be open starting today and be open through February 25th for you to give us some feedback on a survey using our survey instrument. There are also virtual office hours that the planning team at Park and Planning is available to have conversations with any member of the community about this master plan of transportation. That's on Mondays and Wednesdays from 1 to 3 p.m. And then we'll have future engagement meetings, like I mentioned, this spring, and we hope to get participation and get some more in-depth feedback and conversation, because that's important. Of course, we want to have everyone getting contact information. So there's a website, and we're going to copy and paste this in the link, but you can go to bit.ly, bit with a dot, ly, mpot 2035. That'll get you to the project website. You can email Judith or Crystal, and you see their email addresses here. And then you can follow us on social media at PG Planning MD on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We want to make sure we've hit all of the demographics, people who use social media, people who use email, and people who make a phone call. We want all of those to be available to you to be able to provide input. I do see a question in the chat. Will there be opportunities for public feedback between the draft in November and the January hearing? Crystal.
There will be feedback available. Yes, we will be soliciting feedback. Just because yes, let me give you the short answer is yes. The time frame, now I will be honest, the time frames may change slightly, but I mean, that part is just very tentative, just in terms of making sure that we hear from everyone about the project and the process. And my fear is that we get to the end of the process and someone say, I never even heard about it. But I mean, again, so our time frame may change just a little bit, but that is definitely, that is our plan right now.
Yeah, thank you, Crystal.
And it'll be a continuous feedback. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, continuous. And again, I mentioned I wanted to give you a few moments at the end. If you had any other questions, comments, concerns that you wanted to raise, we're definitely open to getting any additional thoughts on the process.
And monitoring, Odessa, just real quick, and monitoring other breakout rooms, there have been a couple of questions that have come up. One is the presentation will be available on the project website.
Yes.
So we'd like to and I know the text may have seemed to be a lot, but we wanted to make sure that if someone came just to the project website, they would be able to get an understanding of the project at that point. So we do have that information available. Again, I am Crystal Saunders Hancock. Myself and my team, we're available to assist with any questions that people may have. And granted, we do not always have all the answers right at our fingertips, but we will work to get you the information that you need, any questions you may have, or direct you to someone.
Awesome. Thank you all for sticking with us. I know this is a lot of information. I hope you'll be interested in staying involved in the process and giving us this input. It's really critical for us to end up where we want to with a master plan that will serve all of us as residents who live in this county and care about the county and want to be able to move from our current time all the way through our senior years and move safely throughout the county. So I appreciate all of your time. Thank you guys so much for participating. And we look forward to seeing you in our future engagements about the Master Plan of Transportation. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Odessa.
Wonderful. Have a good evening.